The click of Lisa Carter's heels echoed sharply against the sleek floors of Los Angeles International Airport. It was 6:45 a.m., and she had meticulously planned her trip, boarding early, settling into her seat in first class, reviewing last-minute details for her upcoming meeting in New York. Everything was set for a smooth flight. Dressed in an impeccably tailored navy blue suit, Lisa exuded quiet authority. She carried nothing but a designer handbag and her phone, her long hair pinned in a neat chignon. To anyone watching, she was just another first-class passenger, successful, polished, yet unobtrusive. And that was exactly how she wanted it. As she stepped onto the jet bridge, she noticed a subtle shift in the atmosphere. The flight attendants, clustered near the entrance of the aircraft, exchanged glances. Lisa caught it immediately, a flicker of doubt, of skepticism. She had spent years in corporate environments, reading micro-expressions, understanding the unspoken. Something about her presence made them uneasy. And then, Megan Sullivan appeared. Megan was a veteran flight attendant, her uniform crisp, her stance rigid. There was something about her presence, an air of entitlement, of authority wielded too eagerly. Lisa had seen the type before. Megan's eyes flickered over Lisa's figure, landing briefly on her handbag, then back up to her face. Her smile was thin, perfunctory. "Excuse me, ma'am," Megan said, her voice edged with something Lisa couldn't quite place yet. "Are you sure you're in the right section?" Lisa blinked, taken aback. "Yes, my seat is 3A. Megan didn't even glance at the boarding pass in Lisa's hand. "That's first class." Lisa held back a sigh. "I know." There was a pause, just long enough to stretch into something uncomfortable. A few nearby passengers glanced up from their phones, sensing tension. Megan folded her arms. "May I see your ticket?" Lisa's jaw tightened. "Of course." She held out her phone, the boarding pass clearly displayed. Megan barely looked at it before shaking her head. "I'm sorry, but there seems to be an issue with your booking." Lisa frowned. "What kind of issue?" Megan pursed her lips. "A problem on our end. I'll need you to step aside while we sort this out." Lisa's fingers curled around the strap of her bag. "I'd prefer to take my seat while you check." Megan's smile didn't reach her eyes. "I'm afraid that won't be possible." Lisa glanced at the other passengers boarding behind her. A middle-aged man in an expensive suit breezed past without question. A woman in a beige cashmere coat walked by, nodding politely at the crew. No issues. No scrutiny. Just her. "I'd like to speak with the gate agent," Lisa said, keeping her voice measured. Megan's expression hardened. "That won't be necessary. I'm asking you to step off the plane." Lisa exhaled slowly. "Are you implying that my ticket is fraudulent?" "Of course not." Megan's tone was syrupy now, feigned innocence. "It's just a mix-up. But I can't let you board until we resolve it." Lisa could feel the weight of the passengers' eyes on her now. Some watched with vague curiosity, others with quiet amusement. No one intervened. No one questioned Megan. She could push back, demand to speak to the pilot, call corporate. But Lisa knew better than to escalate, knew how easily a situation like this could be turned against her. The smart move was to comply. Still, she wasn't going to make it easy for them. Lifting her chin, she met Megan's gaze. "I assume my bags will be removed as well?" Megan hesitated, caught off guard by Lisa's calm defiance. "Yes, of course." Lisa nodded once. "Then let's not waste any more time." Without another word, she turned on her heel and strode off the plane, her composure intact. But as she stepped onto the jet bridge, a sharp knot of fury tightened in her chest. This wasn't an accident. This wasn't a mistake. And Megan Sullivan had just made the worst decision of her career. Lisa's heels clicked against the polished airport floor as she strode through the terminal, her breath steady despite the boiling frustration inside her. A part of her wanted to let it go, to chalk it up as just another day in an industry where power plays were constant. But she couldn't ignore the way Megan had humiliated her, not just as a passenger, but as a woman who had fought tooth and nail to reach the position she was in now. She reached the private lounge designated for executives and high-profile travelers. Before she could even sit, her phone buzzed. It was Paul Whitmore, the director of operations at Atlantic Airlines. "Lisa," Paul's voice was tight, urgent. "Are you off the plane?" "I am," she replied coolly, pressing a hand to her temple. "And I'd love to hear a damn good explanation." There was silence on the other end. A silence that told Lisa everything. Paul cleared his throat. "There's been a misunderstanding." Lisa exhaled, forcing herself to remain calm. "A misunderstanding? Paul, your crew just threw me off a first-class seat that I paid for. That was not a misunderstanding. That was targeted." Paul hesitated before speaking again. "I'm going to be honest with you. Megan Sullivan, she's not just a flight attendant. She has deep ties with some of the old executives, specifically the ones who weren't thrilled when you were appointed VP. There's been chatter. Some of them don't want you in power, Lisa." Her grip tightened on the phone. "And you're telling me they're using flight attendants to try and undermine me?" Paul sighed. "I'm telling you that Megan knew exactly who you were when she kicked you off that plane. And I believe she did it deliberately." Lisa felt a slow, simmering anger rise inside her. This wasn't just about an overzealous flight attendant on a power trip. This was a calculated move. She turned on her heel, already walking back toward the departure gate. "Paul," she said, voice steady, sharp. "That plane hasn't taken off yet, has it?" "No," Paul said quickly. "The tower's holding it. Do you want me to?" "Yes." Lisa cut him off. "I want you to stop that flight immediately." She could hear Paul moving on the other end of the line. "Done. I'll notify the crew." Lisa hung up and walked with purpose. Heads turned as she moved through the terminal, but she didn't care. She was not about to let Megan and her allies win this round. Back on the plane, Megan stood near the front of the aircraft, arms crossed, her face composed but with a small, victorious smirk tugging at the corner of her lips. She had done exactly what needed to be done. Lisa Carter was a problem. From the moment Lisa had been named vice president of Atlantic Airlines, whispers had spread among the longtime employees, especially among those loyal to the old guard of executives. Lisa was young, ambitious, and had a reputation for shaking things up. People like Megan, who had spent 25 years climbing through the ranks, knew what that meant: layoffs, corporate restructuring, a loss of power. So, when Megan had spotted Lisa on her flight, dressed discreetly but unmistakably herself, she had seen an opportunity. She had known exactly what she was doing when she questioned Lisa's ticket. She had known exactly what she was doing when she publicly embarrassed her. Megan hadn't expected Lisa to fight back. The sudden crackle of the intercom made her straighten. "Ladies and gentlemen, this is your captain speaking. Due to an unexpected delay, we will be returning to the gate. Please remain seated." A murmur spread through the cabin. Passengers exchanged confused glances. Megan's smirk faltered. A flight attendant leaned toward her, whispering, "Megan, there's a hold on takeoff." "Something's happening." Megan's stomach tightened. And then, the moment she dreaded arrived. The aircraft door opened. Lisa Carter stepped inside. But she wasn't alone. Two high-ranking executives from Atlantic Airlines flanked her. Megan's blood ran cold. The chatter among the passengers died instantly as Lisa strode down the aisle, her presence now impossible to ignore. No longer a quiet, invisible traveler, she was in command. Passengers watched as Lisa stopped right in front of Megan, her eyes dark and unreadable. Lisa tilted her head slightly. "We need to talk." Megan forced a neutral expression. "Ms. Carter, Lisa held up a hand. "Not here." Her voice was calm. Almost too calm. "Step into the galley." Megan swallowed. She had no choice but to follow. The confrontation. Inside the galley, away from the passengers' stares, Lisa turned to Megan. The executive stood behind her, arms crossed. Lisa's voice was dangerously soft. "Would you like to explain what happened back there?" Megan straightened her shoulders. "Ms. Carter, I was simply following standard procedures. There was a discrepancy with your ticket, and—" "No," Lisa's tone sharpened. "Let's not do that, Megan." Megan hesitated. I didn't recognize you." Lisa's lips curled into something that wasn't quite a smile. "Didn't you?" Megan opened her mouth, but Lisa continued before she could speak. "You and I both know that's a lie." Lisa's voice was silk wrapped around steel. "Because I just got off a call with corporate. And guess what, Megan?" She stepped closer, her eyes locked onto Megan's. "They told me you knew exactly who I was when you pulled that stunt." Megan's mouth went dry. Lisa let the silence stretch before continuing, her voice razor-sharp. "You humiliated me in front of a full cabin. You questioned my right to sit in a seat I paid for. You kicked me off my own airline's flight. And you did it because you thought I wouldn't fight back." Megan swallowed hard. "Lisa, Ms. Carter," Lisa corrected, her expression unreadable. "You don't get to use my first name." The weight of the moment settled heavily between them. Then Lisa took a slow breath. "I want your entire crew gathered. Now." Megan hesitated, but one of the executives nodded. "Do it," he ordered. Defeated, Megan moved past Lisa, her hands slightly trembling as she went to call the team. Lisa remained where she stood, staring out toward the cabin, where passengers whispered among themselves. She had let it happen once. She wouldn't let it happen again. The murmur of the passengers had died down, replaced by an uneasy silence. Lisa stood at the front of the aircraft, her arms crossed, waiting. Megan had just gathered the entire crew, and now they stood before her, 3 flight attendants, a service manager, and even the captain. Their expressions ranged from nervous to outright uncomfortable. Lisa let the moment stretch, allowing the weight of what was happening to settle over everyone. Then she spoke. "I'm going to ask a simple question," she said, her voice calm, controlled, but razor-sharp. "Did anyone here think it was acceptable to remove a passenger without proper justification?" No one answered. Lisa's gaze swept over them. "Not one of you objected when I was pulled off this flight. Not one of you asked Megan to verify my ticket. Not one of you questioned her authority when she humiliated me in front of this entire cabin." A muscle in Megan's jaw tightened, but she stayed silent. Lisa took a step forward, her voice still even but laced with something undeniably powerful. "So, tell me, was that standard procedure?" Silence. Lisa let out a humorless chuckle. "Because, you see, I just spent the last 10 years of my life making sure that this airline ran on excellence, not ego. And yet, somehow today, I was treated like I didn't belong in a seat I paid for." Her eyes locked onto Megan. "Because someone wanted to make a point." Megan's face remained stiff, but a flicker of panic crossed her features. Lisa turned to the captain. "Captain Reynolds, you've flown for this airline for how many years?" The older man cleared his throat. 17. "And in those 17 years, have you ever seen a first-class passenger removed from a flight before takeoff without a single verification process?" Reynolds hesitated, then shook his head. "No, ma'am." Lisa nodded slowly. Then, she shifted her gaze back to Megan. "Let's get to the truth, shall we?" Lisa's tone was softer now, almost dangerous in its quiet control. "Megan, did you, or did you not, know who I was when you removed me from this flight?" Megan's fingers clenched at her sides. "I told you, Ms. Carter, Lisa held up a hand, cutting her off. "Before you answer, I want to remind you that I have already spoken to corporate." She took another step closer. "And they have the emails." Megan's face paled. Lisa's lips curled slightly. "Got you." "Oh yes," Lisa continued, her voice silk smooth. "Emails from a select group of executives, discussing how unfortunate it would be if I had a, how did they put it? A disruptive experience while flying with Atlantic Airlines." A tense shift went through the crew. Lisa took a slow breath. "They knew I would be on this flight, Megan. And so did you." Megan's throat bobbed as she swallowed hard. Lisa pressed on. "I want to hear you say it." Megan was cornered. She knew it. Lisa knew it. The entire crew knew it. After what felt like an eternity, Megan finally exhaled and muttered, "Yes." The admission hung heavy in the air. Lisa took a step back, nodding slightly. "There it is." One of the younger flight attendants, a woman in her mid-20s, looked at Megan with something like horrified realization. You knew who she was?" she asked, voice barely above a whisper. Megan shot her a sharp look, but the damage was done. Lisa turned to the entire crew. And yet, none of you said anything. None of you stepped in. Her tone wasn't angry, just disappointed. That silence. That complicity. That is exactly what's wrong with this airline. Another long beat of silence. Then Lisa straightened, fully stepping into her power. Megan Sullivan, you are relieved of duty, effective immediately. Megan's mouth fell open. Lisa. Ms. Carter, Lisa corrected sharply. Megan blinked, her face darkening. You can't fire me on the spot. There are procedures. Lisa raised an eyebrow. You didn't seem too concerned about procedures when you removed me from this flight, did you? Megan's lips parted, but no words came out. Lisa turned to the service manager. Escort Ms. Sullivan off the aircraft. The man hesitated but then nodded. Megan took a step back, her confidence crumbling. This is a mistake, she hissed under her breath. You have no idea what you've just done. Lisa tilted her head. No, Megan. You had no idea who you were messing with. Megan stood frozen for a moment. Then, without another word, she turned and walked toward the exit. Lisa watched as the woman who had once smirked in victory was now walking off the plane in humiliation. And then, a sound. A single clap. Followed by another. Then, a small ripple of applause spread through the cabin. Lisa turned. Some of the passengers were nodding. A few even smiled. They had witnessed what had happened. They had seen injustice, and they had seen justice served. Lisa let out a slow breath, then turned back to the remaining crew. For the rest of you, let this be a lesson, she said. I expect better from this airline. I expect better from my employees. And I expect better from those who claim to serve our customers. The crew stood rigid, absorbing every word. Lisa took one final glance at the exit, then turned toward her rightful seat. This time, when she walked down the aisle, she wasn't the woman who had been silently dismissed. She was the woman who had just changed everything. The applause died down as Lisa settled into her seat. The weight of what had just happened pressed against her chest, but she kept her expression calm. Composed. Unshaken. She wasn't just another passenger anymore. She was the woman who had taken control of the entire flight. As the aircraft taxied back toward the runway, Lisa noticed how differently the remaining crew members carried themselves. Their movements were stiffer, their interactions more careful. It was clear they had just witnessed a power shift. The young flight attendant who had questioned Megan earlier, Hannah, according to her name tag, approached hesitantly. Ms. Carter. Her voice was careful, almost nervous. Would you like something to drink before takeoff? Lisa studied her for a second before replying. Coffee. Black. Hannah nodded quickly, then hesitated. She glanced around before lowering her voice. I just wanted to say that what happened back there, it wasn't right. And I'm sorry none of us spoke up. Lisa held her gaze. Why didn't you? Hannah swallowed. Megan, she had influence. If you crossed her, she made sure you paid for it. People were afraid of her. She exhaled, almost embarrassed. I was afraid of her. Lisa considered that. Fear was a powerful tool, one Megan had clearly wielded well. But not anymore. Lisa nodded, her voice firm but not unkind. Fear only controls you if you let it. Hannah nodded quickly before retreating to prepare Lisa's coffee. Lisa exhaled, finally allowing herself a moment to process. But just as she reached for her phone, it vibrated in her hand. Paul Whitmore. She sighed and answered. Paul. Jesus, Lisa. Paul's voice was hushed but intense. I just got off the phone with the board. What the hell happened on that plane? Lisa rubbed her temple. You already know what happened. I know you fired Megan in front of a full cabin. I know it's already all over social media. And I know the board is in full damage control mode. Lisa's jaw tightened. Damage control? I was the one who was publicly humiliated, Paul. And I handled it. Paul hesitated. Look, I'm on your side. But the reality is, Megan had friends in high places. People who aren't happy about this. Lisa clenched her jaw. And those same people were the ones plotting against me, weren't they? Silence. Lisa knew the answer. Paul sighed. Just be careful, Lisa. You shook the tree today. You don't know what's going to fall out. Lisa's fingers tightened around her phone. I don't care what falls out, Paul. If they wanted me to stay quiet, they should have thought twice before pulling a stunt like this. Another pause. Then Paul said, That's exactly what they're afraid of. Lisa didn't reply. She hung up and stared out the window, watching as the city lights of Los Angeles blurred below. This wasn't over. Not even close. Atlantic Airlines headquarters, New York City. By the time Lisa landed at JFK, the firestorm had already begun. News had spread fast. Someone on the plane had taken a video of the confrontation, and it was already making rounds on social media. The clip showed Lisa calmly but ruthlessly dismantling Megan, the moment she said, "You didn't know who you were messing with," already becoming a trending quote. Some called her a leader who wouldn't tolerate discrimination. Others accused her of abusing her power. And then there were the corporate sharks, the old executives who saw this as their golden opportunity to fight back against her leadership. When Lisa walked into the Atlantic Airlines headquarters that evening, she could feel the tension thick in the air. People turned as she passed. Some nodded in quiet support. Others avoided her gaze. Paul was already waiting in the conference room, pacing. Lisa tossed her bag onto the table. "How bad is it?" Paul ran a hand through his hair. "The union is pissed. Megan's already lawyered up, claiming wrongful termination." Lisa didn't flinch. "She violated policy. I have proof. She's got no case." Paul hesitated. "Yeah, but the real problem isn't Megan. It's who's behind her." Lisa narrowed her eyes. "Go on." Paul took a deep breath. "The old executives, the ones who fought against your promotion, they're using this. They're pushing the board to review your position. They're saying you acted impulsively, that you embarrassed the airline, that you put us at risk of a PR disaster." Lisa crossed her arms. "And what does the board think?" Paul sighed. "They're split. Some support you. Some are looking for a reason to push you out." Lisa tapped her nails against the table. "Let them try." Paul gave her a look. "Lisa, this isn't just about a flight attendant. This is about control. They wanted to send you a message. You just sent one right back. Now they're going to escalate." Lisa leaned forward, her voice steady and unwavering. "Then I'll escalate right back." Paul exhaled. "What are you planning?" Lisa straightened. "First, I'm putting out an official statement. I want it clear that this wasn't just about me. It was about a systemic issue in this company. Second, I want a full review of all employee complaints against flight staff over the last 5 years. If Megan was doing this to me, she was doing it to other people." Paul hesitated. Then, slowly, he nodded. "That actually might work." Lisa's expression didn't waver. "This isn't just about one bad employee, Paul. This is about cleaning house." Lisa sat at the long, polished conference table in Atlantic Airlines headquarters, her posture straight, her expression unreadable. Across from her sat the board of directors, 12 powerful individuals, all watching her closely. The tension in the room was thick. At the head of the table, William Harding, the chairman of the board, leaned forward, fingers laced together. "Ms. Carter, do you understand why we're here?" Lisa met his gaze. "Yes," she said simply. Harding nodded. "You've made quite the impact in your short time as vice president. But after the events of yesterday's flight, there are concerns." Lisa didn't let him finish. "With all due respect, Mr. Harding, let's be honest about what this is." She placed both hands on the table. "This isn't about Megan Sullivan. This isn't about a flight incident. This is about control. Some of you never wanted me in this seat, and now you're using this as an excuse to challenge my authority." A few board members shifted uncomfortably. Harding's expression remained neutral. Lisa exhaled slowly, keeping her composure sharp as steel. "You want to talk about damage control," she continued. "Let's talk about the real PR disaster, the fact that employees like Megan were allowed to abuse their positions unchecked. The fact that your own executives were willing to let your new vice president be humiliated just to prove a point. Harding frowned. Lisa, I've spent the last 10 years helping this airline grow, and I refuse to sit back and let it rot from the inside. Lisa slid a folder across the table. In the last 24 hours, I've had my team pull reports on every passenger discrimination complaint in the last 5 years, she said. Do you know how many cases involved Megan Sullivan? Harding hesitated. Lisa tapped the folder. 17. A murmur rippled through the boardroom. Some of the members hadn't expected that. Lisa leaned back. 17 documented cases of inappropriate behavior. Ignored, buried, never addressed. She let the silence settle before delivering the final blow. And do you know what's worse? Megan wasn't the only one. She placed another folder on the table. This company has a culture problem. And if you're more concerned about me than about fixing that, then maybe I'm not the one who should be defending her position. Maybe you should be defending yours. Harding's jaw tightened. Another board member, a woman in her 60s, Eleanor Vance, one of Lisa's biggest allies, spoke up. What exactly are you proposing, Lisa? Lisa looked around the table, knowing this was her moment. A full internal audit of employee conduct, new leadership policies, mandatory customer service retraining, and a clear message that discrimination, abuse of power, and toxic leadership will no longer be tolerated. Silence. Then, Eleanor Vance nodded. I support it. Another member followed. Then another. Harding sighed, rubbing his temple. Then, finally, he nodded. Lisa had won. 6 weeks later, the air inside Atlantic Airlines training facility was charged with energy. Lisa stood at the front of a packed auditorium. Hundreds of employees gathered for the company's first-ever leadership reform summit. New training programs had been rolled out. Employees, from pilots to ground staff, were now required to undergo customer-first training. And the company had just introduced a zero-tolerance policy for discrimination. Lisa had done it. She watched as the crowd listened attentively. Among them, she noticed familiar faces, some who had once dismissed her, now watching her with respect. Lisa took the microphone. 6 weeks ago, I boarded a flight as a passenger. And I was told, in front of an entire cabin, that I didn't belong. She let her words linger, making sure they sank in. I wasn't removed from that flight because of an error. I was removed because of a culture that tolerated bias, favoritism, and unchecked authority. She let her gaze sweep over the crowd. Well, that ends today. A murmur of agreement. A few nods. Lisa continued, her voice strong, unwavering. This isn't just about one incident. This is about making sure that no passenger, no employee, no person is ever made to feel small, disrespected, or powerless in an airline that bears my name. She paused. So, if you're here because you believe in a better company, then you're in the right place. Applause started to build. Lisa took a breath, letting the weight of the moment settle. She had fought. She had won. And she had changed everything. Final scene, first class, Flight 101 to New York. Weeks later, Lisa boarded another flight, this time with purpose. As she settled into her rightful seat in first class, a flight attendant approached with a warm smile. Ms. Carter, welcome aboard. Can I get you anything before takeoff? Lisa smiled genuinely this time. Just coffee. Black. The flight attendant nodded. Lisa leaned back, looking around. The atmosphere was different now. The energy among the staff. The way passengers were treated. She had done more than just hold onto her seat. She had changed the airline. And she wasn't done yet. As the plane began its ascent, Lisa looked out the window, watching the sky open before her. She belonged here. And now, everyone knew it.